All right, just so I can get a sense of the room, how many people in the audience are investors? Just show of hands. LPs, investing in direct companies, yeah, pretty good number. How many people are founders? Well, sorry, one more. And how many are founders, running companies and operational roles? Okay, a small handful. So today's panel is to talk about failure points and how investors and founders can work together, how investors can help their startups be more successful. Something I think we all look forward to. I know we've all had good and bad interactions with investors, and here's to figure out some best practices, and hopefully this panel can illuminate how to operate and set up those relationships for max productivity. So let's start with introductions. Aloha, how are you?
Hi.
Hi. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing now, and a little bit about your investment thesis and how you interact with companies?
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. It's so good to be with you, and it's great to see some familiar faces. But if I haven't met you yet, I'd love to connect at some point after the panel. My name is Nguyen, and I recently moved into the wonderful world of venture. Prior to that, I was a 16-year product leader. Started my early career at eBay in 2000, and then led the product and design teams at 4 early to mid-stage startups. And then in my current role at Spiro Ventures, which is a new $100 million venture fund, while I invest, I also am the main operating partner, and I'll share a little bit more about what that means in a bit, but that's a little bit about myself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Deena Shakir, and I'm a partner at GV, the artist formerly known as Google Ventures. I've been at GV for about 1.5 years. Prior to that, was at Google for about 6 years, working on product partnerships and early stage products, from healthcare to machine learning to computer vision to the philanthropic side of things at google.org. And prior to that, I was actually over in the public sector doing partnerships for the previous administration. I'll tell you a bit more about GV very briefly. We are the venture capital arm of Alphabet. We're a financial investor, not a strategic investor. We currently have about 350 companies in our portfolio, and my role is as an operating partner. I'm on the partnerships team, which we'll talk more about later.
Heck, I don't call you Google Ventures anymore. You rebranded from Google to Alphabet, and Google Ventures and GV. Like, what gives? Was that all part of the same strategy?
Well, so Alphabet emerged a couple of years ago as a parent company, but Google Ventures was always a separate entity, so separate legally set up as a venture capital fund. Alphabet is our sole LP, right. But we invest for financial return, so it's not strategic investments.
Right. Okay, makes sense.
My name is Khalid Halim. I'm actually an executive coach, so we work with CEOs of venture-backed companies and venture capitalists, so we kind of see both ends of this. We work with over 200 companies at one time, but probably way more than that over the last 4.5 years that we've been around.
Excellent. Eva?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Eva Howe. I run a seed fund in LA called Fika Ventures. Prior, I was a GP at Sousa Ventures, which I helped co-found, and before then, a founding team of several companies, including Applied Semantics, that sold to Google in 2003. I was at Google for a while, and then co-founded a company called Navigating Cancer, and then co-founded a company called Factual. So, been on both sides of the table.
All right, great. So, first question for the group is, can you give me, from your own backgrounds, can you give me a couple of examples where you've seen very positive outcomes from investors working with startups and founders and their management teams? Maybe a couple of very positive examples you've either seen or that you've been a part of, and then one really bad example, one do not. And you can change the name of the founders or the investors if you want to protect the identity of the innocent.
I guess I'll start. So as an operating partner, and my official title is product partner at Spiro Ventures, one of the things, and I should start with, there's 3 partners of a 5-person team at Spiro Ventures. As I mentioned, we're a $100 million fund, sole LP, which is Pierre Omidyar, and we are investing in mission-driven companies that can get to venture scale and have positive impact on the world at scale. We have a 5-person team. 3 of the partners of Spiro Ventures, including myself, have a combined 50 years of product experience leading product and design teams. And so as the product partner, one of the things that I do a lot with our portfolio companies is I teach the discipline of product management to our founders and to our startups. And so two sort of examples of that. The first is helping them to understand and separate out the problem space from the solution space. So I find oftentimes in working with our founders that they're so quick to jump to the solution. So the next feature to build, the next product release, as opposed to really taking a step back and really thinking about the customer problem that they're trying to solve. And so I work a lot with them through a process of customer discovery, where we really deeply understand the needs and the pain points of our customers, put themselves in the world of our customers, and then deeply understanding the problem space before we, to jump into solutions. And then the second manifestation of that is that I help our startups incorporate design thinking principles in their product development process. And you'll know a lot about sort of what I do in this regard. So once we understand the needs of our customers, I will oftentimes come in and I'll run design sprints with our companies.
Sounds familiar.
Yes, it sounds very familiar. And Jake was a mentor for me, so he's been great. Jake Knapp wrote the book Sprint, and he was design partner at GV, but he was a mentor to me, and I had, when I was in operating roles, I had run design sprints with my own teams with great success. And so what we do there is we bring a cross-functional team together. We understand the problem space and what our customer needs are. We design a challenge statement around those customer needs, and then we go through a process of ideation until we come up with the solution that we then go out to customers and vet. And we only then build something that our customers say, I have to have this now. And if they don't have that joy when we test our solutions with them, we don't even bother handing it over to engineering. And so that's sort of the couple of examples of what I think we do that is helpful to our entrepreneurs. Why don't we go through and maybe I'll sort of share
the negative on the rebound.
Maybe
Sure.
we'll just go through the positives first. And then
Sure, why not? So Deena, what are some good examples? You were a product manager at Google, so before you went to the GV side, so you've got a lot of experience with PMing and a lot of great expertise to share. What are you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the things that really drew me into GV was the emphasis on the power of the VC firm to help with operating across the operating spectrum. We had, and we still actually have, an incredible design team. So design thinking, design sprints, design coaching is a huge part of what we do. But from the early days, we also had a talent team, a marketing team, a comms team, and my team, the partnerships team, whose job it is to provide opportunities for non-dilutive capital across our portfolio. So essentially matchmaking. So I spent about half of my time meeting with large corporations and organizations who are thinking about how to approach innovation and are looking for someone to help them filter what are the best companies to work with. How can we solve our challenges around cybersecurity? Who are the top companies in the therapeutic space? What's the best customer chat startup that's out there? By being in the Alphabet universe, I also have access to a lot of these large organizations that are coming and meeting with Alphabet on a daily basis. So although I mentioned we are separate from Google, we are still part of the Alphabet family, and that also helps a lot of the companies in our portfolio. One example I'll highlight of a company that had a recent exit, and I think really highlights the spectrum of engagement that GV can have, is Flatiron Health. So for those that are not familiar, Flatiron Health is a company that sought out, in a way, to do for cancer data what Google did for the world's information, to make it accessible and searchable. The co-founders, Nat and Zach, had sold their ad tech company to Google.com, and both of them had experiences in their own families with cancer. And being Googlers focused on data, they took a deep look at the industry and thought that there was an incredible opportunity to take this disparate cancer data, to make it accessible, to make it usable, to really improve outcomes in oncology. And we got involved with them from the very early days. In fact, we even embedded one of our investors, Vinita, on the product side of things for almost 2 years. She's an MD, PhD, who's also an investor on our team, completing her residency right now, and added incredible insights not only on the product side, but as a clinician as well. And she's going to be training in oncology. We also helped them to hire some of their top engineers. We ran design sprints with them. We helped them to do user research in oncology clinics. It was my team actually that introduced them to Roche, which started off with a commercial deal and ended up in a $1.9 billion acquisition earlier this year. So again, a great example of putting all hands on deck and really providing value to the company well after the actual capital allocation has been made. There are many other examples of this in our portfolio. Our team has over, I think, 75 folks on it now, and only a little over a dozen are only investing. So we've got very strong operational teams that do everything from supporting with press releases to coaching on design to providing talent, recruiting support. And I'll come back to the negative one after we hear all the good examples.
Excellent.
I'll answer this from a little bit of a different lens. So I'm not a VC, I'm a coach, and I'll just start with an anecdote. So I had a company that I was working with. They had just raised about a $20 million Series B. This was years ago. And they call me and they go, we have to fire our first executive and we don't know how to do it. And I said to them, didn't you just raise $20 million from a VC that has, a couple dozen operational people that can tell you how to do this? And they said, they just gave us $20 million. We don't want them to know. We don't know what we're doing. And so, what we're hearing is this amazing resource that's available along with the capital is all this operational resource. And so when I think about times when investors have really helped is they came in and said, we understand that we've seen this dozens or maybe even hundreds of times, and you're seeing a bunch of this stuff for the first time. So we're going to make it really easy and say, we know you don't know what you're doing. So come to us. And they make the proper introductions, and they just drop that, like, you don't need to pretend with us. The best manifestation of this that I've seen was a well-known Series A firm had made an investment in an entrepreneur who was on his second company. And I was his coach during the first company. And I happened to know this VC as well. And so she started by interviewing him and said, listen, we know that you're not strong at everything, and we just gave you a bunch of money. So we want to allocate that capital to where it's going to help you the most. If you're amazing at sales and not great at product, let's help you recruit and build product muscle. And he called her and he said, you know what you should do? You should call my old coach and ask for my last 360. And she said, that's amazing. We got on the phone and with his blessing, talked about his strengths and weaknesses. And to me, that just showed an amazing move by the VC who said, we know you're not great at everything. Where can we help? And let's not start by pretending that everything's going to be fine. This is a startup. It's going to be messy. And guess what? We're in the business of helping you get through that. So
I love that story of kind of shared vulnerability, but very rare between the power dynamic between a investor and then especially maybe a first-time founder who's raising for the first time, or at least at that level. That is exceptionally rare.
And what ultimately happens is you have this amazing resources in these firms all around you, and I see it all the time. Entrepreneurs are afraid to reach out, and it's almost as if the VC would go first and just say, we built this because we actually know it's going to be tough, and you're not going to know what to do, and it's okay. And if you can normalize that and humanize that, then all this investment and all this amazing, brain trust and knowledge then can be deployed in the way that it was meant to be deployed.
Yeah. And then Eva?
All great points here. I think there's a natural tension between investors and founders. I felt it for 20 years and have lots of horror stories from my first company, Applied Semantics, to later better stories at Factual. I think my experience at Factual, where we raised our Series A of $25 million and had Andreessen, Ben Horowitz on the board, was really the inspiration for me starting Fika, because I've always had such horrible interactions with VCs that I never wanted to be a VC. It was not on my radar as a career path at all. But when we did Factual, I think a lot of VCs oversell what they're going to do to get in, and then once they get in, they kind of underdeliver. I think it's a common story if you pull a founder sort of to the corner of the room, like that person early who introduced us. Like, it's generally not a really positive relationship. I think when we did Factual, we were building this wacky deep tech platform, data platform, API. This is 2009. Nobody knew what APIs were. and Ben took a first bet on us as a company in LA that was building a very nerdy product. I think early days he would pitch us as the company that he didn't understand, but that he liked the founders and that they had vision. I think Ben, when he came onto the board, he was also being an entrepreneur himself and building up A16Z. This was the early days, so we were the guinea pigs of their platform services. So they'll do executive sessions, be like, Eva, what did you think about that? Was that useful? And I think I was really humbled by how much feedback they were trying to get from us in terms of building what they were doing. The one thing that really I remember very clearly was we were trying to recruit the president of Caltech, of the Caltech student body, and we were going up against the Googles and others, and I said, hey, Ben, can you give him a call and try to like help us get, because we're just this little company in Factual, and he gave him a call and we got that recruit, and it was at that point I was like, that's what an investor is supposed to do. Like somebody as big as Ben will roll up his sleeves and get dirty and help us get a junior engineer recruit. And those are some of the values that we bring to FICA, because FICA, we're a little fund with 40 million. We live and die by our references from our founders. If we don't get good references, we get no money from LPs, period, right? So I think we have to earn our reputation every single day, and I think a lot of that's inspired from people like Andreessen.
Okay, that's great. So I'd love to take questions from the audience. If you can go to slido.com, type in pre-money, you can put your questions into main track 1. If hopefully that'll show up on the board. If it doesn't, I might pull in Adam Sterling and just take audience questions for the crowd. So let's go back in reverse order from Eva back. So what are some of so those are all great examples of where investors can be helpful through networking, through market distribution in certain cases. Ha and I share a dirty secret. We were at PayPal and eBay, oh my God, 18 years ago. You were on the eBay side, on the integration side, and I was on the PayPal side integrating that acquisition. We lovingly refer to you as the evil empire when we were acquired. But boy, did PayPal's business accelerate from a very successful integration to eBay with a go-to-market strategy, help recruiting, help the capital, and fundraising, obviously. What are some of the real bad habits that investors have that you've seen, and how do we get away from those behaviors, or how do we put up the kind of the right checks and balances so that doesn't break up that founder relationship? So Eva, back in reverse order.
I'm going to go quick because I want to hear from these three. I think in the first company is a very common. I mean, there's many things that VCs do wrong. They had a portfolio company that was competitive to ours. We were just a little company in LA, could not get any attention from investors. We raised only $5 million when we were selling to Google. Conflict everywhere, and we didn't know what we were doing. We were in our 20s, and they had a conflicting company and made it very challenging. Which, again, we were like a nobody little company. So again, it really like sealed in my mind that a high moment for us and to get an offer from Google became a low moment because we had to fight through it because we had misaligned incentives.
Yeah, good.
I have a lot of stories, but I'll only tell one. The rest are all confidential. No, I'd say there's a general pattern of VCs wanting to be over-helpful and forgetting that the final decision needs to be with the CEO. They're going to be running this company for 5 to 10 years, and they need to have conviction. So often they set up a lose-lose situation in which they say, you know what you need to do, you really need to do this. And then the founder ends up in my office and says, so I want to do something else. My heart, like my intuition about this is I should do this other thing. But if I do it, I'm in trouble with my VCs, and if I do what they tell me to do and it fails, it's still going to be my fault. So like, how do I get out of this? And so often the best, how we remediate that is I've seen VCs say, look, I've seen this before, here's what I think you should do, but at the end of the day, it's your call and you need to stand behind it. And that last little piece makes all the difference. You can give all the advice and all the experience that you have and share it, but remember that the final call rests with the founder, because they're going to get the blame either way.
Deena, what do you think?
Yeah, I think building off of that, taking the, diluting this sort of power dynamic that's been discussed here between the founder and the VC, and part of that is rolling up, being able to roll up your sleeves and help them, as we've talked about across different spectrums, and also just sort of being very aware of that dynamic and using that convening power for good. So whether it's bringing together different companies around questions about diversity and inclusion, sort of switching the model such that it's not just about giving money, but actually about providing thought leadership and providing convening power. We just convened our comms summit in the city last week, which was a great example of trying to build community among the portfolio, bringing together leaders from PR and comms and marketing across our portfolio companies who often are individual contributors who don't have peers, and helping to facilitate lessons learned and creating a community. I think that's one great example of how we as a VC can help to create community and dilute that dynamic.
Great.
So I would totally agree with what Khalid said, which is if you've been in an operational role for a long time, it's very easy to want to overstep your boundaries and tell the founder, here are all the things that you're doing right, here are all the things that you should be doing. And so you want to sort of take a step back and make sure that you realize that the founder knows their market the best, the customer the best, the data the best, the industry the best, right? And then you can help facilitate, and you can help guide, and you can help ask the right questions, but you can't overstep. On the other end of the spectrum, though, I do think that there is this power dynamic where sometimes founders are afraid to ask, because here's a successful founder turned VC who's had multiple exits, and you don't want to go to them sharing all your deep, dark secrets or concerns that I don't really know how to run this business, right? And so I do think what's critical there is sort of building that trust and that relationship over time, making sure that you know that you're really this trusted partner to them, but that takes time. They're not going to come to you right in the beginning, like sharing sort of all of their needs. And so what I try to do is I try to put it on the calendar, like check in with our portfolio once a quarter, grab coffee, and then sort of share how I can be helpful and ask them, how do you need help? But if I find that I don't do that and just put that touch point on the calendar, they won't come to me, and they won't necessarily come to other folks on the team either.
So what's a good practice what's a good practice on communication with the team? For those of you who've seen it, typically, at least the companies that I've been in are more later stage public companies. So the routine is a quarterly board meeting. There's definitely a cadence and a routine around those interactions with your investors. And so minimally you're meeting once a quarter. But especially for the earlier stages companies, what's a good practice on communicating with the founder? Like how often, what's too much? Meeting every week, that sounds like close to maybe being meddling or micromanaging, although I guess there's a style that you can do it. But what's the right cadence and frequency, and how do you set it up so it feels like non-threatening, but at least it's not like, fly in for the quarterly board meeting and fly out again? What's a good setup in your mind? Anyone who wants to take it.
I think this is another example where humility and listening is really important, because there's no kind of textbook answer to this. It's going to be different for every company. But you also don't want to be putting demands on your portfolio company. You don't want to be asking them constantly to meet just for the sake of meeting and feeling like you've had a check-in. You don't want to be asking for data reports with so much frequency that it's inhibiting their ability to actually get their real work done. So it's kind of a fine line. I think the key here is really to ask. And that's something that we try to do instead of sort of imposing our notion of what we think we can do to be helpful. We try to sort of take a design thinking approach and actually understand from our portfolio where are the gaps and where are the needs. And if you look at our history, like GV has sort of pivoted a little bit in terms of how we've structured our operational teams to make sure that we are actually providing services that the portfolio wants, needs, and finds helpful.
All right. Humility and listening. That's gonna be tough for me, but it's good. Good advice. Let me take some questions from the audience now. This is a trial question. Do not read it out loud. Oh, sorry. No. It's how about this one? What are some of the points of a company's journey where things break in different ways? Like, are there team sizes? Are there stages of the business? Are there any areas where from experience this is going to be hard for the company to get through, even though they may not know it? Khalid?
Yeah. So I often help companies as they approach 30 employees and then go on through 300, and it breaks constantly. But so it's funny. So if you look at military groupings, they break at those group sizes. So the most efficient size is a group of 3. Then there's a group of 8, which if you've ever had more than 8 direct reports, it starts to get a little frazzled. And then you have 3 groups of 8. And right around 20 to 22 is when you're like, okay, we're done being a flat organization. We need a manager. Okay, how do we introduce layers and titles? You double that again, and HR breaks.
Right.
Right, and that's usually when version 1 of your executive team, which was just really early employees and not really real executives, are not scaling. And then it breaks again when you double again around 100, when you need like, okay. So there's these predictable patterns, but the first break is introducing management at 20, HR breaks somewhere between 30 and 40, definitely broken by 50. And then how do you let go of people that aren't scaling? Even though their heart's in the right place and they've been with you since day one, they're just not able to scale. So we just see it over and over and over again in companies at those points.
So I'll just add that I think culture and communication I agree with those sort of breaking points, the numbers, but what I find is that, when you're less than 10, 20 people, you can get everybody in the room and you can communicate strategy to them, and everybody knows what's going on. And then once you hit the 30 number, you can't get everybody in the same room, maybe in all hands, but not everybody knows what's going on. And so one of the things that we try to do is make sure that our founders are really communicating not only their values, but also how are they regularly going to be communicating out to the rest of the organization. And people need to hear sort of the strategy articulated 3 times, 4 times, 5 times before it internalizes. And I think that that's a breaking point, which is sometimes founders just, especially early stage ones, are just running. They assume that everybody knows what's going on. And then once they hire their first few executives and all of a sudden there's 30 new people in the team, not everybody knows what's going on and they're not all marching to the same sort of direction. So
you've seen patterns. So Eva, you've seen patterns in companies that fit that bill. Like they hit certain breakpoints, events, milestones, critical size, maybe size constraints. How do you communicate to a founder in a constructive way without seeming, I think Deena said micromanaging or overly bearing or menacing? How do you do it? How do you do it in a way that gets results? You have to do it. You have to do it, but they don't always see what you see. So how do you effectively do that?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what Khalid said. I mean, it's building the foundation early on in that both parties can be vulnerable to each other.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not an investor to be there to be the best friend. I'm not their cheerleader.
Yeah.
I'm there to help them when they need to be helped. And I think that level of trust has to be built from day one early on. And so that you can foster that communication and get to what the truth is. Because I think there's just so much information asymmetry between two parties if there's any element of mistrust. So that's what I try to do early on with the founders is, right from the beginning, like we're going to talk about things. Some people, like Deena said, wants to talk every day. I mean, I have people that text me every day, and there are folks that I talk to like every couple of months because they know what they're doing, they're going, and I'm not going to interrupt them. So I think it's very contextual, but I think it is based on authenticity, respect, and that can be only built through time.
Yeah. That's great. I think we're about out of time. So thank you very much for the panel. Thank you to the panelists for your contributions, and thank you to the audience.
thank you. Thanks, Aman.
Thanks.